four very talented individuals here. We have Tina Norden, partner at Conran Partners. We have Patia Leka and Jamie Hughes, architects at Studio Eisslinger. And we have Alexander Garba, founder of Stilwerk. Thank you all for joining us. I'm Clay. I'm the founder of Bespoke Sound. We're a music identity studio partnering with hospitality brands to create amazing sonic and musical experiences for their guests. There's a powerful connection, certainly, between architecture, sound, and atmosphere. So, in this roundtable, we want to talk to the four of you about your everyday work, how you think about sound within that work, from acoustic engineering to the guest experience, uh, anything that goes into the spaces that you design.
Well, there's a really lovely quote from I believe it's Goethe, who actually said that architecture is frozen music and vice versa. So I think there's a very strong connection there that has always been there for me. Certainly because my partner is actually a musician, so there's definitely a kind of correlation there. We tell stories really through going very deep into projects from the very beginning. So a lot of research goes into our projects, looking at the context, looking at the people we're designing for, looking at the client, looking at the brand, whatever it is that kind of constitutes a project. And we take all of that into account when we start working up the concept, which is really the storyline for every project. And with that, we're then looking at, okay, what do we need in order to tell that story? And sound is certainly in an architecture environment hugely important, either the absence of sound and making it quiet, or indeed overlaying it with sound. And a lot of our work is on the hospitality realm, where obviously music and atmospheric sound is hugely important.
Our vision is to create inspiring spaces, and if the sound is not inspiring, it kills everything, because if you have a tingling noise in the background, it never works. So I think it's an elemental part which is sometimes way too neglected. If you go, also sound design, if you go to shopping center or hotel and the sound or the music is bad, then you leave immediately. I do. So I think that there needs to be a holistic approach in it, and that's how we try to create and try to tell the story. That you take the story of the location of the building or whatever it is, and take up that story and enhance it with sound from the beginning.
Maybe we can talk about the curatorial aspect of it, because one thing I really loved on the Eisslinger sort of manifesto on your site was the idea of the designer as a curator and a DJ. We think of our curators and DJs as designers. So I'm curious to hear more about that philosophy.
Actually, it refers to experiences, most of all, like, because of course within the space you have to synthesize through different materials and experiences and all this. But I think like one big part that we try to do always in all the projects, from competition stage to till the last moment before something opens, is actually DJing and bringing together different beats when it comes to experiences and what is happening. So never a project we start and finish by ourselves, but along the way, we really want to have people close to us that they fit either to 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 the end product, to the end result that we want to get to. So it could be a cinema collaboration. Then we learn and we take things from them and from what they can bring in. It could be a collaboration for music. It could be a collaboration with smell that actually has happened like in several hotels, that they want to have like a certain smell, or collaboration with locals, with craftsmen. So we take all these different elements and we try to put that together. So it might be that our first draft is something, but from there going to the end result that a guest will visit, there's so many more tunes that were added in there.
Yeah.
And it usually happens from people.
Alex, I'm wondering if you have any insight into your perspective on curating items and elements and the approach of a designer as a curator, or in this sense as a DJ?
I think it goes hand in hand. I think it's part of it. I think you cannot not do it, because if you design something, you take things which might have been there or which are new, and you put them together, and that's basic curation. There's this amazing book about curation, and it's basically saying that curating is a new the curating is a new creating. And if you take that book and look through it, it's not even only curating rooms or feelings or atmospheres. It's curating basically life. Yeah, and I think that's why this word is used so much, because I mean it is actually a substantial part of creating. I think if you look at what we're looking at now, we're looking at a camera, we have headphones, we have music on the phone. I mean, that's it has all been there before. Yeah, it's just put back together, so it's been curated. Yeah, so and I think that's how we look at it. It's just it's a necessity. You cannot not do it.
And I think potentially today more so than ever, in a way, because everything is online and everybody is so aware of what's going on all across the globe with design, with music, whatever it might be. So I think claiming that something is completely new is a difficult one to prove these days. So I think it's now about how you put it together, how you interpret it. You know, we're forever looking at precedents online, and actually a lot of designers quite often use the same precedents because they're the ones that are kind of pertinent or happening right now and whatever. And then it's really about what do you do with them? Because if you just take them and you copy them, then of course, you know, it is just that. But if you're actually kind of, you know, if you have the ability to actually do something with it, interpret that in a different way, put it together in an interesting way with other things, that's when it becomes really interesting and unique.
Yeah. And one of the leading trends in design, it could be argued, is very clean-cut, minimal interior with hard surfaces, not a lot of furnishings, and that may look good, but it doesn't necessarily sound good. So how do you balance the acoustics of a space with the design of the space when there's sometimes contradictory?
I wouldn't say that necessarily all of our spaces are industrial, but we're certainly more on the contemporary side with less frills, which obviously then does always throw the question of acoustics open to a project. And we think about this very, very carefully, particularly when you're talking about spaces like restaurants where you may have a huge number of people at any one time. And a bit of din and atmosphere and sound is great, but if it becomes so loud that you can't hear the person across from the table from you, then it's a disaster. And we've worked on a project once, you know, I think someone else said earlier, we don't always get it right. We don't either. Where we designed some big chandeliers. They were almost like a big disc in the ceiling. And they turned out to be absolutely perfect for hearing someone about 4 or 5 meters across the room. Not the person across from you, but the person over there. So that had to be changed. So we do try to think about this with these kind of things very early. And, you know, if there is a room where we have mostly hard surfaces, you can do a lot with that. There's acoustic plasters. There are layers that you can integrate into flooring. There's things that you can do with the ceiling, even things like, you know, putting felt under tabletops and things like that. So there's a lot of things that you can do without having to necessarily compromise on the way a space looks. When you have quite a high ceiling, if you actually have a fabric cover over panels, you almost don't see it because it just disappears. So I think it's just being really clever with thinking about where can we get something in that can assist with the acoustics. And, you know, if it really is very complicated, and we've worked on acoustic spaces before that are properly for listening to music in perfect circumstances, then we work with acousticians who are not the easiest. I think they're quite challenging to work with for us because obviously they want absolute 100% perfection and we want a nice design. And sometimes, you know, there's a lot of compromises to be made, but they can certainly help a lot with kind of getting it much closer to where you want to be, particularly when you're trying to do music, particularly when you're trying to do performance, or when you're trying to, you know, just have a nice meal and be able to actually understand your companion.
And Ipati and Jamie, how about you? What's your perspective on the balance between design and optimal acoustics?
And I think one way we try and design around that is to create the bespoke furniture. and the soft furnishings in the space to really soften the often hard surfaces of the concrete shell we're working in. So thinking about the curtains and the way we design the seating and other areas of I'm thinking of hotel public spaces, for example. The way that we design these spaces, we're introducing a lot of soft fabrics and soft materials to also balance and to create spaces that are pleasant to be in.
Yep.
I have to say though that it has happened many times to go also on the other side. When creating maybe a bakery or the cake shop. So there is also like a very thin line that is also very difficult for us to be sure on which side we are of this line. That is the space also to not be acoustically super insulated, because when you are in a restaurant or in a place that you expect that it's busy and lively, when all the sounds are dimmed out and it's overdone acoustically, then actually the space feels kind of dead. So there are so many layers, but also too much acoustic protection can backfire in the overall sense of a space.
Yeah. So
This
thinking
has
about
happened in the past, and we learned from that.
yeah.
I think sometimes as well it's a little bit difficult to predict, especially in the smaller projects where there might not be an acoustic consultant on the project. It's a little bit sort of leaning into past experience and trying to get the right balance. And sometimes there's small adjustments to be made towards the end of the project just to make sure everything is as it should be.
Yep.
I think it's a bit of an art form. It's not always so precise in the design process.
Yep. Alex, as someone who has a handful of hotels, what's your experience on the other side in terms of your expectations for the acoustics of a space and how you think about sound working in, say, a lobby or restaurant?
I think we all know how it is if you come to a place which is a nice acoustic and to room or space which is bad acoustic, and I think it sounds so simple, but then creating this nice acoustics is actually sometimes a challenge in itself. Yeah? So our expectation is always, and then also the expectation of our guests is always, they want a cozy acoustics. Maybe if you want to frame it like that.
Yep. Putting you on the spot, but is there a correlation there between music and a space, and just maybe even as a layman visiting a space, is there a way that you think about music working in a space to impart that style or that taste or that feel that people can appreciate?
Definitely. I mean, the example that I always like to give is we went to a restaurant in New York some years ago, which is owned by James Murphy, or co-owned by James Murphy, and it's almost like an old pub. It's very warm, very atmospheric, almost a little bit thrown together, and they played the coolest music in there. It was all kind of noi, old punk records and whatever, next to having dinner, and it shouldn't really work, but somehow it worked in that environment. And I thought that was a really good example of someone really curating a space in a very quirky way, but the way the sound system worked and the sound levels and whatever meant that actually it was really enjoyable to be in, even though the music was probably jarring, on paper for that kind of environment. So I think thinking very carefully about the sound in a space is so important. And there's so many kind of music concierge companies out there and whatever that work together with, particularly with hospitality, to put together playlists. And I can't emphasize enough how important a playlist is for a space. It really is.
Sound is something that brings a little bit of this fantasy that we want to have in our projects. So playlist, of course, I double down on everything that Tina and Alexander said already, that they are kind of make or break in a space, if you want to be in that or you just want to run away, or if it makes your night even better or terrible. So absolutely super agreeing on the playlist. Future-wise though, I will go back to the installations and the special elements that are unexpectedly found around. So, for example, we were talking on this early on discussion about this installation that we have done on an elevator. That is actually while the elevator goes up, there is a screen that it's showing while almost as if you're looking out of the window to something different. And then there is a part that there are even some birds, so that you actually hear this. It's so sudden and it just becomes like an experience all of a sudden, and it's so inviting and captivating that especially
unexpected.
Yeah.
It's not what you expect to hear in an elevator. So it's acoustically and visually taking you into a different place.
So the journey, I think that the journey that music and can take you to, even if it's not playlist by itself, which is of course important, absolutely, but then the opportunities to surprise someone and create like a magical moment. This is super important.
I mean, I think with the playlist as well, I think that will, I think most often come from the client. So it's about this important collaboration between the client and the designer as well. That when that is working really well and everyone understands each other, then the client is bringing the right consultants to the table and also is really instrumental in creating these the right acoustic environment in the right space.
We did it once in one of our buildings near the harbour. We took the original sounds from the harbour and recorded them and then played them in the building, and people wanted to buy that sound.
So cool.
That's cool.
I think one thing I would say is don't underestimate the human factor, because actually the occupation in a space makes quite a big difference to how sound works in a space and how it's experienced. So, for example, if you're designing a lobby space, you're probably not going to have that many people in it. So the acoustics are going to be very different in terms of effect and impression than it would be, say, in a space where you've got functions on and you've got 100 people standing, or in a very busy restaurant. So that is actually quite a big factor in terms of design, and it's an important one to think about and often something that's forgotten.
Thank you all so much for taking the time to chat with us and sharing your wisdom and your insight. Thanks again for joining us. Really appreciate you taking the time, and everyone have a great rest of your week.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Great
Thank
to
you.
see you all.
Thanks a lot.